ElizabethLCline, Overdressed, The Shockingly High Cost of Cheap Fashion. In a world dominated by a fast fashion, the book Overdressed, The Shockingly High Cost of Cheap Fashion by ElizabethLCline examines its adverse impacts on the clothing industry and the environment. The book takes us on a journey from the days of high-quality, locally made clothing and department stores to the boom in cheap, disposable apparel that now pervades our global market. Highlighting the rise of big chains and the decline of unique designs, the book explores the environmental and social consequences of this shift while shedding light on the future of the fashion industry, and how we, as consumers, can make informed choices and rediscover the art of sewing and tailoring.
The rise and harm of fast fashion. The rise of fast fashion in the 1990s has caused significant changes in the clothing industry and consumer attitudes towards clothing. U.S. consumers used to buy clothes a couple of times a year at department stores priced according to their quality. However, fast fashion offered constant and inexpensive clothing, leading to a culture of disposable clothing. Big chains now dominate the clothing industry, putting traditional clothing sellers out of business. It also changed consumer attitudes about the cost of their clothes, leading to manufacturers searching for ways to cut their production costs, such as relocating their manufacturing plants. The result was the collapse of the U.S. garment industry and imports dominating the clothing market. The harmful effect of fast fashion on the environment and the industry as a whole is unsustainable. The evolution of clothing manufacturing. Clothing manufacturing has shifted from being made in the U.S. to outsourcing production to countries with cheaper labor. The North American Free Trade Agreement further reduced restrictions on imports, benefiting today's clothing manufacturers. As consumers' attitudes towards clothing changed, cheaper imports flooded the market, and consumers viewed their clothing as disposable. At the same time, high fashion expanded into multinational entities, intensifying the purchases of cheap fast fashion. Fast fashion responded by adding some detailing to imitate high fashion, making consumers feel like buying prestige. The dark side of fast fashion. The rise of fast fashion has led to a loss in the quality of clothing. Manufacturers have cut corners to offer cheaper prices, leading to a decline in sartorial knowledge among consumers. Seasonal selling is out, and continual consumption is in. Clothing construction has suffered as well, making the industry less appealing to immigrants. The demand for inexpensive clothes has created a vicious circle that is stifling creativity and reinforcing the demand for cheaper clothes. The cost of fashion. The fashion industry produces an overwhelming amount of textile waste, with the U.S. alone discarding 12.7 million tons of textiles annually. The environmental impact of the industry extends beyond disposal, as manufacturing cheap clothes often lacks ecological regulations. Production of cheap clothing also includes plastic products, increasing waste. Charitable organizations struggle to keep up with the influx of cheap fashion, resulting in textiles ending up in landfills. The availability of quality vintage or consignment stores is dwindling due to the saturation of cheap clothing. The true cost of fast fashion is detrimental to both the environment and the availability of quality secondhand clothing. Fast fashion and exploitation. The demand for fast fashion has led to garment workers in developing countries being subjected to substandard and exploitative working conditions while their wages have been cut down. Retailers are aware of this and make efforts to distance themselves from the sweatshop phenomenon, but the demands of fast fashion are too great. Some companies still engage in extreme overtime without proper compensation, putting strain on employers' budgets. None of this will change unless consumers demand it. Unsustainability of China's fast fashion industry. China's fast fashion industry has been booming due to low wages and illegal labor unions. However, the increasing middle class and mobility of workers have caused a rise in labor costs, making exports more expensive. To combat this, clothing manufacturers are relocating to countries like Bangladesh, although production standards and quality are not yet comparable to China. Additionally, the Bangladeshi labor market is smaller, and safety issues are a concern. As the cost of textiles increases, fast fashion prices are starting to rise, leading to an unsustainable situation. The solution may be to refocus on quality and longevity, rather than constantly producing cheap and disposable clothing. The power of sewing. In our fast-paced society, we've lost touch with the art of sewing, but a movement for slow and local fashion is encouraging people to rediscover this valuable skill. Instead of buying fast fashion, the author suggests that you learn to sew. Not only can you save money, but you can also avoid bland, mass-produced clothes and express your individuality. By repairing and refashioning your existing wardrobe, you can reduce waste and support local suppliers. Clothes that you make and wear with purpose can be a source of personal inspiration. So, take up sewing and take control of your fashion choices.
At the end of cheap fashion's cycle, the book Overdressed enlightens readers on the wildly destructive impact that our culture of disposable clothes has on the environment and society. Our continuous demand for low prices drives manufacturers to unsustainable practices and compromised quality. As we move away from high-quality, well-made garments, our current reliance on fast fashion contributes to tremendous waste and loss of valuable skills like sewing and tailoring. However, as Cline suggests, the future offers hope for change. The revival of slow and local fashion, learning to sew, and refashioning our wardrobe can help us tread lighter on the planet, appreciate the artistry of clothing, and rediscover our individuality.